Hello, welcome to Word Balloon Academy 2021, presented by the Santa Monica College School of Creative Arts and Animation. My name is Miles Baker. I'm the Executive Director of the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. Before I hand things off, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the original caretakers of the land that I am on, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Wendat peoples. I'm joining you today from my home, which is in territory that was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, Haudenosaunee, and allied nations. This area is also covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I make this acknowledgement as part of a long process in learning what it means to grow up, live, and make art on colonized lands. Going forward, TCAF is committed to increasing Indigenous voices and perspectives in our programming.
I can go.
Okay.
First, I want to add on to the land acknowledgement. I'm not prepared with the full details, but I'm currently in Portland, Oregon, which I know my specific location is Multnomah, unceded Multnomah land. The Multnomah are a Chinook people, and there were other Chinook peoples that occupied the Columbia basins on both sides, and a whole host of other Indigenous peoples that lived in this area as well. So my name is Joamette Gill. I am the head / only employee of Power Magic Press. We've been around since 2016, putting out anthologies for now. Containing works by BIPOC, LGBTQIA+ people, everyone who intersects, and most recently our forthcoming book, Mañana, Latinx Comics from the 25th Century, also features Latinx creators from all over the hemisphere, every nationality, every race, every gender for once. It's our first anthology with cis men in it. Welcome, cis men. Representation matters. So yeah, we've got, including Mañana, we've got 5 publications to date. They've all been kickstarted. I think we've raised somewhere between $200,000 to $300,000 collectively on Kickstarter over those 5 books. And in addition to publishing through Power Magic Press, I also occasionally actually make comics as well. I draw them less these days, collaborating with other artists now as a writer. And my bread and butter is managing editor, that's the term, being the managing editor at Weird Enough Productions and doing lettering for lots of different publishers like Dark Horse, Oni, Comixology, you name it.
I love those of us in comics whose passion is admin, because everyone looks at us like, admin? Really? Like, I love admin more than I love drawing. Camilla.
Hello. Yeah. Sorry, I was muted. Actually, my mom came early. It's Mother's Day over in the States, so my mom came early to my house. So I had to mute myself. Sorry, there was a lot of chaos. Anyway, hello. My name's Camilla. I'm coming to you live from, I believe, Lenape. I'm gonna mess up the last one. Something. I can't remember, so I'm really sorry. It's in Brooklyn, or modern, what is now known as Brooklyn. Yeah, so I am the former comics outreach lead from Kickstarter, and I'm currently the senior editor at V2 Comics. I'm also a comics and prose writer. I have been published by Top Cow and Cross Genres, recently entered the magazine. And yeah, I'm working on various projects. I also consulted on Scott Snyder's Kickstarter campaign that ran last year, pulling in over $200,000. That was a monster. It's still ongoing because of continued delays because of COVID and shipping and I apologize to the European backers. They've been so patient, and I, we can get into that later. But yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell about me.
I got a quick message from the chat. Is it Lenape Hoking?
Lenape, yes, Lenape Hoking. I was like, oh, I can hear it in my head, but I can't say it. I don't know how to say it. But thank you so much, Michael Kelly.
Already happening.
Thank you.
All righty. I guess that goes really quick into the next part. We're gonna talk about what topics actually y'all want to go over. I have a few in mind, but I would love to hear. Oops, is the screen share working again? There we go. So I want people to be able to go into the chat and tell us what kind of topics or questions you have to ask Joamette, Camilla, and I. Keeping in mind that, Joamette does, I picked her out, or I asked her, requested her, because she works especially in comics anthologies crowdfunding. Camilla's just, the OG in Kickstarter comics. And I work in marketing and fundraising in general. Although I have done a Kickstarter before. So what I don't want to talk about today is budgeting or how to run a crowdfunding campaign step by step, because you guys can definitely already find resources for that online, especially something as specific as budgeting. There's a lot of I'll probably link this at the end. A lot of resources for templates and what you need to consider. I really wanted to go marketing in general because I feel like marketing is like 60% of what crowdfunding is. What do you guys think? Yeah? It's mostly crowdfunding. It's mostly marketing, but
marketing is that like magic kind of like secret sauce that nobody really knows how to, like that's something that's kind of like the nebulous. It's not as easy to explain as like a budget or like how do you fulfill a campaign, So I definitely think that marketing is a good topic to cover. For sure.
I can't uncross that, but we'll definitely come back to that. I wanted to get more specific than marketing and talk about building your audience with crowdfunding, because I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking you can't do a crowdfunding campaign without an audience, but I feel like a crowdfunding campaign is a good way to build your audience. Mm-hmm. Or it's a way. And then
it's definitely a good way, yeah.
And then I wanted to talk about maybe, when I ask people what the hardest part of crowdfunding is, a lot of people say fulfillment, like shipping and postage and all that junk. So do you think that's true, or I don't know?
Do you want me to answer that, or do you want any of us to answer that?
Sorry guys, I kind of wanted like a back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I don't know if it's the hardest, but it is one of the most frustrating parts of running a campaign.
When I think of fulfillment, I think of all of my friends with angry tears,
Yes, it is a lot of angry tears because and this is, I mean, I hope that there's some backers listening in so that they can understand the process. A lot of crowdfunding, depending on how large your campaign is, if your campaign has thousands of backers, it's sometimes hard. It can be hard to educate backers on you're one person managing thousands of orders, and it's part customer service and part logistics and operations. And when you're a Kickstarter creator, you're, generally speaking, an artist or some kind of creative, you have a creative role, and you don't always find yourself equipped to handle those things unless you've done a lot of research and have prepared. So it can be really challenging, I think, to anyone running a campaign for the first time. Sometimes, starting small, like you were mentioning, building your audience through crowdfunding can be nice because you're already familiar with how to fulfill like maybe several hundred orders as opposed to several thousand, and you can kind of work your way up as you grow the audience, you know.
I can't even imagine thousands. I hit like 600 and I'm not handling it. I'm not handling it well. I think one of the questions, so I wrote down some of the questions we got. I don't know if this is in chronological order because Q&A and the chat are different things. But one of the questions, people do want to go over the basics, where to start, and about marketing in general. Someone asked about stretch goals, and I also would love to hear about that because, okay, this sounds like a humble brag, but it really is a suffering of mine where I hit more than I asked for on Kickstarter, and then I just didn't know what to do. And so the question is, should people have stretch goals ready in advance, or can they do it as they go along? And what happens if they exceed even the stretch goals?
I have two very specific answers for that. One of them is a direct answer, and one of them is a hot take. So I'll start by answering the actual question, which is, yes, you plan your stretch goals in advance. At least that's how I've always done it. The thing with stretch goals is that none of it is, or not none of it, but most of the money you see a Kickstarter earning past the goal that they set, it's not free money. Like, it's not suddenly like if your goal is $10,000 and you're up to $15,000, it doesn't mean, oh, now they have $5,000 extra dollars. Now it means you have to see how many more, basically it takes a certain number of backers to get your goal. And then every time you go above your goal, it's because you have more backers now. And more backers means you now have to spend more money on more copies of the product than you were originally planning to make. It means you have more people to pay shipping for than you originally planned. It means that that $5,000 is also subject to Kickstarter's fee and any card processing fees that are going to come out of it. So the reason I would always recommend you plan your stretch goals in advance is because you need to budget them. You need to figure out how much they're going to cost. And it's only by knowing that and also factoring in the cost of the additional backers that you'll know how high to set the stretch goal for. Because you might think, oh, at $5,000, surely I can add a page of original stickers as a stretch goal for the comic. But you need to know if you can actually do that. And you only know that if you're drawing the sticker designs yourself, or if you're going to be hiring like guest artists to draw the stickers. What are their rates? Which company are you printing your stickers with? What's the shipping on that? So truly, unless you've planned it, you can't know what's actually possible with a certain amount of extra money. I wouldn't doubt that there's someone out there who's sort of done it on the fly, and it has gone well for them. And I can only attribute that to sort of a good head for numbers and a good head for like looking at $5,000 real quick and having done this so often that you're like, yeah, I know exactly who I'd be printing with. Yeah, I'm drawing it myself. Yeah, I know when I'm doing, like, you just sort of, you figure it out after a certain point. But if you're just getting started and you've never done stretch goals before, don't think you can do that. Just assume you can. And plan it, because it's always better to be prepared with a plan. And now my hot take. My hot take about stretch goals is you don't necessarily have to do them. You're allowed to make a profit on Kickstarter. A lot of creators.
No one told me that.
Yeah. A lot of creators don't realize that, or think that they can't, or think like, oh no, there's no way. I made so much more money than I needed. I must immediately sink it into something else, or else I'm bad because my comic was successful and lots of people bought it. because when you create something for Kickstarter, you're going to Kickstarter ostensibly to minimize risk. For some people, that looks like, I have no money in the world. I will never fulfill my dream if I don't go to Kickstarter. This is the only way I can afford to print my comic by myself. And then for other people, it could be, oh, you know, I have a steady job. I could pay to print this comic myself, but if no one actually wants it, I might have taken a huge thing out of my savings that I could have used for like an emergency instead. And you don't want to take that risk, so you go to Kickstarter. Or and we're seeing more and more of this, you might be an indie publisher who's like, hey, it'll just be easier to figure out how many of these to produce if we go to Kickstarter first and people like pay for it up front. And that's a little controversial, but especially for indie creators, like single creators who are like, I have no money in the world, I need to go to Kickstarter to make this comic at all. I mean, ideally, you're creating the comic so you can sell it, right? You can sell it in your own shop afterwards, you can sell it at conventions, and whatever you make off of those copies are going to be profit. And I don't see the difference between I profited from this at my table at the con with the books I printed off Kickstarter, and I profited on Kickstarter because now after we made the money to make the copies and do the shipping, these are just sales now. This is just like my online shop now. I'm making profit from the comic that I made for profit. So yeah, the trick around that is that some campaigns can only make their goal if you have additional rewards. Like if you're selling, let's say it's going to cost you, I don't know, like let's say you're going to do a risograph, or you're going to do something that has like a cameo cut cover, which is when there's a hole in the cover and you open it and it reveals more of an image. Let's say you want to do something. Yeah, you want to do something wild, right? You have this dream and it's going to cost a lot to print, but you feel like it's too short though to like charge too much money for it, or you're sort of trying to find that balance between the price point and the goal. And some price points, your price point can be too low to get enough backers if you don't have an audience to make the amount of money to cover the expense of the project. And in those cases, it helps to have extra rewards like, oh, and you also get it signed by me, or you also get this print that I have to get people to pledge more. And stretch goals sort of fall into that category. If you have a stretch goal, it gives people a reason to keep buying, to keep supporting, because they're going to get something extra. And that sort of ties into another thing that people don't tell you about Kickstarter a lot of the time. And that is, people aren't always asking for the exact amount of money they need. Sometimes people are asking for less.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Ooh,
than what they actually need to do it. And they're setting a stretch goal, not just because they're like, hey, let's party, we have extra money. They're like, hey, let's party if we make extra, and also some of that will be the real cost of the product. And then the stretch goal reward is the incentive to keep going over it. There's a lot of insider baseball to Kickstarter that you may not readily find with a Google, and that's why I like to share that kind of stuff, because you're not going to be able to Google it.
Yeah, I would say. Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
I would say that like the people who aren't, so like ideally the backer thinks the goal of your Kickstarter campaign or your crowdfunding campaign, Indiegogo, wherever it is to break even.
Right.
The truth is, what Joamette is saying is some people have already budgeted to swallow some of the costs on their own. So sometimes stretch goals are the break even, and the big goal is the swallow. But my point from like a marketing perspective is that there's actually 3 different marketing campaigns you're running in a Kickstarter, in a crowdfunding thing. One the pre-campaign. Everyone forgets the pre-campaign, and it pisses me off. That should be minimum 4 weeks, people. Like, it should be like, we're about to launch our new shoe and we're Nike. That's the shit.
Yeah.
Then there's the actual campaign, which is running during your Kickstarter.
Mhm.
And then the third one is your stretch goal campaign. And on some level, there's a fourth one that's the post campaign, but you know, like at that point, if you want to abandon your backers, that's your problem. That's more about keeping your customers.
Mhm.
But these are all marketing, blah, blah, blah. But that is what you should be thinking about. Pre-campaign, during the campaign, and stretch goals. And you should be saying hi near the end anyway. I want to go through questions. All right. Oh, do you hear that? Let's see. Let's go back to the basics. When do you think someone is, what does someone base need to run a Kickstarter?
I can take this one. At least, you know, from my perspective, you want to have as much of the comic done as possible. You know, if you're going to be pitching your comic to publishers anyway, you're going to have to invest. Unfortunately, this is, you know, with publishers still the case, is that you have to kind of invest some of your own money or your own time to making the first 6 pages. So, you know, essentially what goes into a comics pitch is what goes on to a Kickstarter campaign page. It's like the first 6 pages, it's the log line, some parts of the synopsis. Of course, like in the synopsis, usually you kind of give away the ending, you give spoilers. Not saying that you need to do that with a Kickstarter, but you need to kind of know where you're going with the story and have as much done as possible, because the more you have done, the more backers will be confident in your ability to deliver the product, you know, or the book. So let's say it's for a 22-page comic that you plan on making a series. Ideally, you should have the first issue done, you know. And, you know, if it's a graphic novel, I totally understand where it can be almost impossible to like invest the money yourself to like into 100 over 100 pages. But again, it's the more you have done, the better. And, you know, ideally you're in a situation where if it's a web comic, you know, you posted it somewhere to live online for a while to build up that audience, whether, you know, it's on Webtoon or there's like the site called Global Comics, which is also like a monetization web comic platform. Tapas. There's a few web comic aggregator like hosting sites out there. If you are lucky enough to get into Highworks, you know, that's also a plus. But yeah, so building up that audience, you know, we talked about the pre-campaign like being a month before you actually launch. But if you want to build that audience up with like your creator-owned series, you should be kind of building that up over the course of 6 months to a year before, you know, because you know, especially if it's like a graphic novel, maybe you release 5 to 10 pages at a time, whether like, you know, having it end on a cliffhanger. So, you know, building up that audience, engaging that audience through social media as much as you can, having a newsletter, you know, having a Patreon, having people kind of support the process of the making of the comic. It's not that Kickstarter can't really function alone, you know, you have to have other things supporting and leading up to the Kickstarter. So building that audience with the content you create, because that's the best way, the most effective way to eventually have a successful Kickstarter. And then maybe it's like you release the comic as black and white line art only. And then, you know, the reasoning for the Kickstarter is like, let's raise money to like add color and to like actually print the book. you know, and then you're taking your already engaged space, right? And then you're building on that and kind of tapping into Kickstarter's built-in audience and building on that some more, and like creating an event, a finite event around this product, you know. And, you know, from there, that's when you start thinking about budget, you know, when you think about, okay, so let's say you're working with an artist and you've already, you know, paid the artist out of your own pocket, right? And maybe you want to just recoup some of your costs for that, and maybe like pay yourself, you know. That's the ideal situation. You can to pay yourself for your labor. Or if it's like an anthology like Joamette does, it's, you know, what are my base costs of like, how much do I need to pay these artists to actually make the stories? Like, you build that into your budget. You have to build labor, creative labor into your budget. And then you build in the cost of actual printing and shipping, you know. And George Rohack actually has, George Rohack, who has run so many Kickstarters.
The comics admin, God.
Yeah, I mean, really, like maybe 50, over 50 Kickstarters, I think. And also George is just one of the most generous people I know, you know. And he actually, when I was running the Noctera campaign with Scott Snyder, he gave me his budget sheet. And actually, I know him personally, and he said, I want everybody to have this budget sheet, but you should also like give him a tip on coffee, like, or buy him a coffee rather. And his coffee link is actually in the, so I'm gonna post the link actually into the chat here.
Please.
So it's a Google Doc, it's a Google spreadsheet, but essentially what you want to do is you play around with the numbers. It's like, there's already formulas in the cells, right? Sorry, I have a hemifacial spasm, so it looks like I'm winking at you, but I promise I'm not like trying to like flirt with everybody here.
No, it's just me, guys. It's just me and Camilla having a thing.
So sorry, this is kind of like an uncontrollable neurological thing. So anyways, yes, check out this spreadsheet, play around with the numbers, you know, have your own budget of like, okay, so I know I want to print a minimum of 100 copies of this, right? Or like I can expect, like I know my audience well enough to like expect a couple thousand. Or maybe you just like want to have 1,000 so that you have enough to sell at conventions for the next couple of years. So like, and you know, once you figure out like the cost of that, and shipping is always a beast. If it were, you know, for me, I prefer to use BackerKit to calculate shipping and charge shipping after the campaign is over. But you know, sometimes that's not something that anybody wants to do, which I respect. And so that I believe this spreadsheet also has a few tips on calculating shipping as well. But once you work out the budget, that's how you set your goal, you know. And then you like in the template, there's also, you know, it gives you some windfall. It asks you to say, okay, you know, maybe put 5 or set aside 10% of your asking amount, because you know you're going to go over that because of unforeseen costs. It's just like there's always something that happens that like you don't expect, and you want like that buffer. Yeah, you need that cushion because you're going to end up using it. You know, it's just the reality of like you know, business. You know, even though this is like creative work, this is a business. You know.
Yeah, can I cut in at that point?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
So I think I want to tackle a few questions at once, but so I've also worked with a lot of small like organization work, mainly startups. So basically, when you're thinking about running a Kickstarter, crowdfunding a product or whatever, you are running a business. So like, if you want, so when we're talking about crowdfunding right now, and I love that we're getting macro about this. Crowdfunding is only a facet of what your business is. Because as soon as you're selling something, you need to acknowledge your business. And if you are a real adult, I'm so sorry. Having a business means the first thing you need is a business plan. And that just means knowing who you are, what your product is, and what the fuck you're doing. And then you need to think about your backers, not just as your customers, but also your investors. So what we're talking about before you run your Kickstarter is ideally you'd have like if you were running a business and you went to an investor in real life, I don't know why I'm saying this, you would need like your product complete to hand over to that bank dude. And if you don't have your product complete to hand over to that bank dude, you have the proposal, you have the pitch. That's exactly the same thing on Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about, I love how you talked about marketing the pre-campaign as longer than just the 4 weeks. Because I just say the 4 weeks because people don't even do the 4 weeks. When people don't even do the 4 weeks, I want to punch them because that's just easy money. But when I think about the pre-campaign in general, what I tell clients that I have, I have clients, that marketing is macro. Think about it as like when you want to watch a movie. You don't hear about a movie 1 month before it screens. The big campaign on the bus ads is 1 month before it screens. That's your pre-campaign. Out now, and on the TV commercials, that's your during screening campaign. And then your post campaign is buy our DVD. But we're talking like pre-campaign is, hi, I'm Marvel, and we're gonna come out with a movie in 2, maybe 3 years. And then 1 year, and then 1 year before the movie, coming summer 2022. Because they don't know. You don't know either. And then like 3 months before the movie actually comes out, it's like, okay, it's coming out September 24th, 2022. I know we said summer, but it's September now. That's the marketing campaign. The marketing campaign starts as soon as you have your business proposal. Your business proposal is, I know who I am, I know what I'm trying to sell, and I think I know how to do it. And that's when it starts. You could just, and this is when we talk about marketing online, social media, is like, you don't need to make new content for your marketing campaign. Just document what you have. And that's like, don't be too serious about it. Or if you don't want to be, like, focus on making your product. And then when you really need to go in on marketing, you should already like be almost done your product. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. They don't premiere a Marvel CG movie. Like, they don't start advertising that until like it's almost done. So I guess that's the answer to when you should have your Kickstarter, when you start thinking about crowdfunding. I want to loop into this one question about grants, because that's just me. Grants in Canada, or government grants in general, don't really like comics. We're not artsy enough. So if you want to do grants, it'd have to be micro grants or like really local. But grants in general will almost never cover printing. So I did my art book. All the content, all the artists, all the payment, blah, 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 was all covered by grants. And then my Kickstarter campaign was meant to only cover printing because government grants will cover the creation of your art project, but not your for-profit sales. So if you're thinking about, the question is about grants versus crowdfunding. Have your project first, then look for grants. And even if you get a grant, you have to crowdfund your printing anyway.
I want to add to that, sort of mixing what you just said with Camilla's note about having the project as complete as possible before you create the campaign. I think that's best practice, especially if you're making something that isn't very long. I did want to add, though, that that can be a little scary / a little not possible
Yes.
for certain people, especially if you're like, I want to make a graphic novel, and I don't want to go through a publisher. Using that just as an example, it often you need to crowdfund because unless you get that money, you won't be able to afford to make it in the first place. And I wanted to reassure people that even though it's riskier for a lot of reasons, people have and do go on Kickstarter and give like the first 5 pages, the first 10 pages of something very long and say, this is what it's going to look like, this is what it's about, and basically do like a pitch package that you would give to an actual publisher. But you give it, but you format it as a Kickstarter, and you're at that point, you're basically saying, hey, y'all, give me the advance that I'm not going to be seeking from a publisher, and I don't have to pay this one back. So that's honestly the benefit. Though I've seen people with shorter comics, like I've lettered a series called Dr. Lovewave and the Experiments, and the way they fund it is through Kickstarter, and they usually complete a few pages of the 22-page issue before the Kickstarter, have it up. They crowdfund what they need to print the book and pay myself and the artist. And once the Kickstarter's over, they're like, all right, now I can pay you for to actually do this. And that can sort of be something to consider for folks who truly like if I don't have this money, like I can't make it work. Like I can't.
Yeah. That's I think that was the point I was trying to make, where think about your backers as your investors and treat them as seriously as you would your investors.
Yes.
Yeah. But this whole conversation is about being a gross administrative adult. So, but I mean, yeah.
It's not gross. It's
I
power. It's our own power and our own money.
But I also understand being an artist, and it's like you don't want to do this stuff. I just want people to be prepared to say to that. But it's like it's not I think the part where Camilla was like, you prepare for this years in advance is like, or a year in advance. This is how long it is. It's the same way where I feel like you should be ready for this though, because if you sat there and you're like, I want to be a freelance artist and do self-publishing, you have to own the whole shebang. This crowdfunding usually is not, well, it can be a one-time thing that you do for chill fun, but if you want this to be income, then you need to take it like that seriously.
Yeah, it's until capitalism falls, this is our reality, and this is kind of like how we survive, and ideally thrive, by making a profit, getting paid for our labor. But yeah, like Joamette said, if it's like a longer project, if it's a graphic novel, doing at least the first 6 pages, getting those colored and lettered, because you kind of like in the tech world, you call it a minimum viable product.
Yes,
and that's what it is. kind of what the first 6 pages are. You need to kind of show people what the story is going to be about, because it's comics, it's a visual medium.
You would have to do the same thing.
Yeah,
you would have to do the same thing if you're investing with a bank or you're writing a grant anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But the good news is that with the first 6 pages, there's a lot of ancillary content you can create with that, right? So like you can take a crop of a panel and blow it up and use that as a background for like a title card. So sometimes you see Kickstarters with like about budget, reward tiers, like those are the kinds of like infographics that you can use to make it easier for like backers to understand what your campaign is about. And ultimately, you know, marketing is all about communication, understanding who you are, what your thing is about, and how you want to communicate it to the rest of the world in a clear and concise way. I know that sounds a lot easier said than done, and this is kind of why, you know, like sometimes people hire consultants or, you know, editors or, you know, people, maybe they still do this, you know, they pay people to write cover letters. There's some people who do that. Or, you know, sometimes, and of course, like if you don't have the money, that's like why you're going to Kickstarter, because like you don't usually have that money. So you rely on your network, you know, like call up a friend and say, hey, I'm having trouble communicating like what this is about. Like sometimes you just need to talk it out, you know, and have a sounding board and, you know, have somebody ask you the right questions. And so like know that you're not alone in this, you know, there's the comics community is pretty generous, you know, and like they're willing to kind of like, you know, once you find your people, you know, they're going to be willing to help you figure it out. I think,
even within online marketing or even marketing in person, I mean, that was a thing. We really like, it's less about finding out who you need to think about communities when you're doing marketing. I know we talk about the ideal customer profile, and it's like it describes one person in your demographic or whatever, but the next question after you find out who your customers are is where they hang out and what they talk about. Like think about them as not just a person or a customer, but as communities. Because I think what a lot of people make the mistake of doing is okay, I'm against random signal boosting, where people are like signal boost this and they just do. I'm like, no, you gotta curate your content. Like you gotta like, you can't just be like signal boost this to everybody. You gotta be like, I find the most success in my marketing when I go, okay, who would like this product? And I'm gonna go find where they hang out and I'll post it there. And that the time I take to do that is more effective than me messaging all my friends to signal boost my product. Cause I don't know, my friend does rock climbing. Her friends aren't gonna be the ones who buy comic books, maybe.
Unless it's a comic about rock climbing.
Unless it's a comic about rock climbing, because there's comics about everything.
And
all right, sorry, do you have anything to add?
Oh yeah, I was gonna add that one of the tips I always give is don't be selfish.
Yeah, man.
Like if you're if you're making comics about something, odds are it's something you're into, it's something you'd buy. And if you're making comics about something that you would buy, but you don't know any of the people who would buy it already, like you're not friends with people who like the same things, you're not part of that community already, like you're not you're not on Discord, you don't talk to people online, you're hunkered up in your art hole, always making art, you don't talk to your friends, you don't participate. Marketing's going to be harder. Like that feels like a leap, like from friendship to marketing. But when I ran my first Kickstarter, I didn't have an audience really. Like I had like maybe 1,000 followers on Twitter. I didn't have an Instagram. I was barely on Facebook. And like I made over like 30 grand on a first time Kickstarter because what I did have was I was friends with everyone who was already making their comics.
Yeah, that was my experience as well.
Already doing their stuff. So when I asked them for signal boost, because that's the only like tool in my toolbox, like I just have my friends, maybe they'll post it on their Twitter, I don't know. I was friends with the people making the kind of stuff that I was also making. So you sort of want to make sure you're not an island, that when the day comes that you need help fulfilling your dreams, you're not coming out of nowhere. You've already been a secondary character in someone else's story while they fulfill their dreams. You've been signal boosting their thing. You've been cheering on your friends. Like, being a community person makes success a lot easier.
We have 7-8 minutes left. There's a lot of people asking about crowdfunding platforms and comparing them. I think we're all biased towards Kickstarter here, but what do we have opinions about?
I just answered one of these questions through the Q&A. Like, I typed it out, but basically, like, some people prefer Indiegogo because it, as opposed to Kickstarter, it's not all or nothing. So Kickstarter is all or nothing. Like, if your goal is like $100 and you get 50, you're not getting anything, you know. Whereas with Indiegogo, you kind of have an unlimited amount of time to make that goal and kind of get whatever you get. The reason why Kickstarter does all or nothing is because it kind of mitigates risk for both you as the creator and the backers who are supporting you. So, like, you know, let's say if you need $100 to create the thing and you only get 50, you're not going to be able to actually create the thing and deliver. So you're going to be disappointing your backers and yourself, you know. So, like, that's one of the reasons why Kickstarter is all or nothing, and that's the biggest differentiator between IGG and Kickstarter. Kickstarter also has kind of firmer rules around content, whereas Indiegogo does not. They don't vet the content or the creators as heavily. For example, you know, if you are a well-known neo-Nazi who has actually outed yourself online, and you try to run a Kickstarter, it's likely that the trust and safety team who works at Kickstarter is gonna maybe deny you access because, you know, we don't, I mean, I speak as a former employee, but like, I still know people there, and I know the ethical practices of the company. And Kickstarter does not like giving a platform to hate people who like hate groups, or people who are a part of hate groups or spouting hate speech. Whereas Indiegogo is, you know, I believe they are also publicly traded. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong about this, but, you know, Indiegogo is publicly traded. Please fact check this. I'm sorry, I can't live fact check right now. But, and so, like, they're more like, in some ways, like Amazon in a sense. Like, their priority isn't necessarily their ethics. You know, their priority is to make that cash. And they have, you know, more, they have less scruples about it, about letting certain people onto their platform. And they also have more money to push into different countries. So Kickstarter is open in less countries than Indiegogo, because Indiegogo has more money to pay lawyers and accountants and all those, you know, magic corporate things. Hopefully,
so
that
yeah, I
answers the
guess,
question.
yes, talking both about thinking about the company itself you're working with and who you want to align with, and your strategy. Yeah, I like Kickstarter from a marketing perspective, corporate brain, because the urgency of a deadline makes it easier to make sales than like an ongoing low risk thing for backers. But if you think about crowdfunding in general, you can also consider that, like, Patreon is a form of crowdfunding technically, but it's not based around an event. It's an ongoing subscription. But the marketing strategies we talked about today still apply. Okay, we are 4 minutes left. I've put up our contact info. Any last words from you two? Camilla or Joamette?
Joe, you want to go first? Like, go
Yeah,
first.
I mean, my tip would be, if you need concrete examples, like you hear all this talk and you're like furiously taking notes, but it's still a little nebulous, go on Kickstarter and look at Kickstarters.
Yeah.
Look at what the people you like are doing and how it works, and be like, okay, everyone who's making money is explaining what their product is first before they explain anything else. So I guess I'll explain mine first. Everyone who's succeeding is putting lots of images from the inside, so I'll put images from the inside. Stuff like that. Basically learn by example.
Definitely there's also a lot of resources that already exist
Yes.
out there. So I'm actually going to drop something into the chat here. That's a good resource page just right from Kickstarter. And I've actually, well, if you actually go to YouTube and type in my name, you might find some like pretty negative things about me, but you'll also find some useful things in there as well. Like you'll find, like what I did, someone invited me on to critique a few crowdfunding campaign videos. And I mean, I think I provided some useful feedback to about those videos. There's also, crowdfunding basics. I've done a video on that. Kickstarter has their own channel for like kind of basic comic crowdfunding. And yeah, I think the kind of biggest takeaway, the biggest tip is to just, I think that the most valuable thing I can offer is to really sit with yourself and ask yourself questions. Think like it's honestly like you will really benefit from self-reflection before you launch. Know what your goals are, know how you want to communicate. Like, what is my story really about? Why is it important to me? Why do I want to share it so badly? Is it a way for me to connect with other people? Asking yourself these questions will give you everything you need to actually market yourself. Because at the end of the day, at the end of the day, marketing is just about communication. I know it's a dirty word, but we can take a little of the dirtiness out of it by like really just being genuine about who we are and what we want from a Kickstarter, from releasing a creative project into the world.
Okay, I do gotta cut you off because it's 4:30. So I think I have the screen share on. Please feel free to message me on Twitter. That's my Twitter or Instagram handle about any questions about today, because I love marketing. I love this is my jam, bread and butter, blah blah blah. And I will be hanging out in the Raid Discord servers today, the link you can find on Raid World website. Plug in anything from you guys?
Yeah, I mean, just follow me on Twitter and ask me questions on that's the best way to reach me, is just like, if you've got a question, at me on Twitter. And stay tuned for like some creative works that will be coming out soon.
Cool. I think we're all live on Twitter, all three of us, yeah?
Yeah.
We all live on Twitter and Discord, but mostly Twitter. Okay, I'll close this. Thanks, everybody. Is there anything we're supposed to say from Miles?
Me again. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for this great panel. Dot, Joamette, Camilla, it was really great and really informative. And obviously a very important resource for so many creators these days in getting their books to market. This was the last program of WBA for this year, Word Balloon Academy. If you're unfamiliar with that acronym, this year's program was sponsored by the Seneca College School of Creative Arts and Animation. They were a real big help this year. Special thanks also to our 2 store retail partners, the Beguiling Books and Art and Page and Panel, the TCAF shop. If you do have a Kickstarter, think about making a retailer tier. It can be a great way to get your books into some of the local retailers, and get in touch with those guys too, because they have, you know, some great knowledge when you are looking to break into the business. My number one thing as someone who does work in retail, put a barcode on your book. Do it. Bookstores will love it. It's so good. And a lot of creators don't do it. And it doesn't take a lot of time, but it will really help get your books into bookstores, even in a consignment kind of way. Having a barcode, you know, means that they're going to have more accurate stuff. Anyway, that's enough about retailers. Special thanks also to our government funders, the Canada Council for the Art, Ontario Art Council, and Toronto Art Council. This is TCAF week. Hopefully you've already been, but go to torontocomics.com. There are over 300 exhibitors from 10 different countries showing their wares on that website right now. The online exhibition runs to May 15th. You can go from table to table, kind of like a classic TCAF or zine fair. Visit our friends at the Canzine and Comics X Games vendor profiles as well. Load up your cart with goodies. Hold on for a little while. Take a little bit of time for us to get those to you, as everyone has to ship all their stuff to us first, and then we're shipping it out. It's so that we don't have to try to keep those logistics clean. That's what we're trying to do over here. As I said, that's it for WBA, but we have programming going up every day this week, including later today. Camilla, it is also Mother's Day here in Canada. We celebrate moms here, and TCAF remains a Mother's Day event, at least for this year. And in that vein, we have another great program coming up later today, Parenting in Comics, with Catherine Ocelot, Keeler Roberts, Sierra Spector, and Dakota McFadden, talking about, you know, being parents, how it's influenced their work, and I'm sure they'll talk a little bit about you know, how being parents has changed their practice. Yeah, I think that is pretty much it for us this time. Thanks so much for coming to TCAF and coming to WBA. And once again, thanks to all our panelists. I'm gonna let you all go. Have a good Mother's Day. Call your moms.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone for coming.